Good morning, good life. You're listening to Detail Therapy, episode 69, featuring YouTuber and travel expert Jess Dante of Love and London.
She's an award-winning YouTuber and best-selling author, obsessed with helping you go after the life you want.
I like it.
Join her as she seeks out the stories and strategies
Give me every little detail.
of extraordinary people who found success.
I'm going to get emotional. Oh my God.
Welcome to Detail Therapy with Amy Landino.
That's how you can tell that you really like something and you're truly interested in that you will be for hopefully the long haul, is if you're just constantly feel like you always want to be learning something new and researching and digging in and trying things, as opposed to maybe something that you feel like, oh, I have to read another article about this, or I have to try this or go to this place, and it feels more like a slog as opposed to, oh, this is really cool. Like, let me read up more about this. Let me do that. Let me see how this works, blah, blah, blah.
You just heard a little bit of my conversation with our guest today, Jess Dante. In this episode, we'll be discussing the details about traveling alone as a solo female. I have been asked so many times what it's like for me to travel alone over the last 15 years that I've been doing it. Maybe at the beginning, I was a little bit more wary of it, but still wanted to see the world. And now it is just business as usual. So I wanted to break down some of the misconceptions, and that is why I brought Jess on today. What do you do in advance of your travels to help with a fabulous and safe trip that you're going to talk about for years? How do you make that happen? What do you need to do to plan for it? And finally, we're going to talk about how to handle a travel decision during a moment of uncertainty, such as a pandemic, which is definitely something that is top of mind for everyone in the world as we record this episode. So how should we be handling ourselves when that's happening? Before we get into it, for those of you who are new to the show, my name is Amy Landino, and I will be your host. You can think of me as your number one productive lifestyle coach. I am the director and founder of Gatlu House, a media company dedicated to helping you go after the life you want. In addition to this podcast, we produce the award-winning YouTube series, Amy TV, which I am also the host of. Me and Jess are super YouTube friends. I've also authored 2 best-selling books, including Good Morning, Good Life, which is now available on Amazon. Links to everything I mentioned will be in the show notes at detailspodcast.com. So this is a very exciting episode. We're definitely talking about some super relevant information and also switching a few gears. So if you've been listening to Detail Therapy for more than 60 episodes, you know that I like to bring the details and I like to sit down with somebody and look at them in the eye and get that information for you. But I recently decided that it wasn't the most efficient way to make things happen. I wanted to get really specific advice, but can't always get on a plane and track them down in order to do that. And thanks to the internet, we can just get this information over the phone, or the proverbial phone, the internet phone. So this is going to be the first episode ever of Detail Therapy where the interview has been recorded virtually. And I had to sit down with somebody who I absolutely love in order to kind of pop that cherry. So very excited that Jess is on today. But also what's really interesting is that we are really focusing on a main piece of information that has been frequently asked of me and that I'm calling an expert in on to discuss. So we're going to zero in on these 7 tips for a fabulous and safe trip abroad, specifically if you are traveling solo as a female, as a woman. Now, I don't think that these tips are not going to be useful for a man, but I know as a woman who travels alone a lot of other women who are not used to doing such a thing have asked me a lot of questions. And so I thought that this would be a great opportunity to break that down. I do want to say that we are very observant of the moment in time that we are releasing this podcast. We had this planned for some time, but we do want to address the current concerns about travel during a moment of uncertainty, specifically around everyone's health in the world. We are experiencing what seems to be a pandemic where travel is not always recommended. So we are going to talk about that. Stay tuned. This episode is not therefore irrelevant because I know there's going to be a day when you're ready to take that trip again because we are all much better and healthier and taking care of ourselves. And so when that moment happens, I think you're going to find these tips very, very useful. Big shout out to my friends over in Shine Squad. If you have not checked out patreon.com/AmyTV, then you don't know where the coolest people supporting each other to go after the lives they want, to get that morning routine, to calendar block their time, to do the things they want to do are hanging out. And that is where they are hanging out. Okay, so I want you to go check out patreon.com/AmyTV to find out which squad level is right for you. If you love podcasts, I upload a new episode every weekday to start your day off right. Just a couple of minutes, not a big commitment. We do live Q&As. We have live trainings for real life action steps. And all those details are at patreon.com/AMYTV. I'll see you in the squad. Our guest today is Jess Dante, a YouTuber and creator of Love and London, a resource helping visitors of London, England get an authentic British experience. As an American living in London, Jess not only fell in love with the city, but continues to show people how to have a trip of a lifetime. Let's get into it with Jess Dante. Jess Dante, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm awesome. Thank you. Hey, I want to know, why do you do what you do?
Oh, well, I've always wanted to do something that I actually enjoy doing and then being able to make money from it. So I've always loved giving people recommendations when they're traveling to some place that I've been to before. And I still, to this day, give so many friends recommendations for places I've been to, not just London. And so the fact that I was able to do that and also build a business around that has just motivated me and fueled me for the last few years.
Like hashtag goals, right? Like that's all we want is to be able to do what we do really well and make money at it so that we can survive and keep doing the things we do really, really well.
Yep.
I just absolutely love your story. Jess, I don't even remember. I feel like at one point you were like, yeah, I've seen your channel before and it was super helpful. And you have been absolutely crushing it on YouTube. For people who don't know Love in London, Jess gives recommendations. And if you couldn't tell, she's not British. So you're an American living in London. I think it's been 7 years now?
Yes, almost 7 years.
Like how have you fallen so deeply in love with London that you've now been there for 7 years?
Oh gosh. Well, when I moved here, I was in this completely new city and I was just so interested in learning so much about it and experiencing new places. And oh my God, London is huge too. So there's just so much to uncover and to discover. And as I started to do that when I first moved over here, I just learned more and more about it. And then I eventually did this so much and was discovering so much that I became my British friends' go-to for recommendations for places to eat around the city and where to go when they had a rainy day and they were coming into the city with friends and family. And yeah, it just kind of went from there. And as I continue to learn more, I'm still learning so much after being here for a few years. I still, my love for the city continues to grow.
I just think that's so fun. I think the central piece of this is just being so curious, right? You were there for how long, you might have been planning to be there, who knows? But the fact that you just continue to learn more and more about the city and you became more committed to it. And then to the point where even the people who lived there were saying, hey, tell us where to go. What should we be doing? And I know that this is so helpful for people like me who love to visit London, but want to do things that a typical Londoner would do, not necessarily just the Big Bens of the situation, which, by the way, sad. Big Ben is always covered up now every time I come to London. So I don't know when that project's going to be over, but that's been underwhelming.
Don't worry, we're getting there. 2021, it should be just about complete.
Oh my gosh, we need that iconic moment back in our visits to London. But anyway, I just think that that's amazing because it's just all about being curious. And I think that that's an indication that you can lean into something that is your passion for people who are not 100% sure what their passion is. Leaning into your passion means being genuinely curious about something and noticing when you are so that you can keep going in on that. Do you feel like that's true?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So that's how you can tell that you really like something and you're truly interested in that you will be for hopefully the long haul is if you're just constantly feel like you always want to be learning something new and researching and digging in and trying things as opposed to maybe something that you feel like, oh, I have to read another article about this, or I have to try this, or go to this place. And it feels more like a slog as opposed to, oh, this is really cool. Like, let me read up more about this. Let me do that. Let me see how this works, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, where you live, it's so easy to continue to travel. I always find that so fascinating about, England, the UK, and Europe just as a whole. There's just so many ways to quickly get to other countries and other beautiful cities. So, have you been doing a lot of traveling, like any places that you've particularly loved visiting since you've been in London?
Well, I love that I can hop down to Italy so easily because before I moved to London, I lived in Florence for a year. And I mean, I love going back there and I love just not even just Florence, but going to the country in general and going to different places, obviously having amazing food, getting to practice my Italian. So Italy is definitely, I've been there the most since I've lived here. And I've been to Barcelona a couple of times as well. And Barcelona is such a great city because it's on the beach. It's big. It's not super expensive. And to fly down to Barcelona round trip on like one of the low cost airlines, you can get a round trip ticket for like sometimes under $100 if you don't check a bag. It's just
Wow.
so crazy as like
That's
Americans to think about that. You couldn't fly anywhere one way practically for $100 in the US.
I can't remember the last time I saw a $100 ticket for anything. Absolutely. Like that it's so fascinating just how different the commuting and the travel culture is on that side of the world. Okay, so this is so awkward right now. I'm just going to call this out. We have had this podcast scheduled for a couple weeks now, and at the time of recording, there is a major travel related issue happening, more health related than anything. And it's what the majority of the population in the world is called coronavirus and is technically called COVID-19. So today we're going to be talking about travel. And I do think that this is a very important topic because, especially for women who are going after the life that they want and they're trying to expand their world and visit different places, things like this, as they pop up, are things that we do need to consider when they do. So even though we're going to be diving into those 7 tips for traveling abroad and doing it fabulously, but also safe, I do feel like we have to kind of address this issue. So just to kind of get this out of the way, because I do know it's top of mind for a lot of people listening, what are your thoughts at this moment about travel as someone is considering it for themselves when we're dealing with what is really a worldwide pandemic at the moment?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a difficult situation because everybody's travel situation is different and also every country is telling their citizens different things and then
Mhm.
every destination is dealing with things in a different way. But always your best bet is to just go right to the source of your country, wherever you're from, your country's government department that is in charge of telling its citizens whether it's safe to travel somewhere or not. And that is really where you want to get your information from. So, for
Yeah.
example, in the US, that's the State Department. You can go right onto the State Department's website and go, if you're planning on coming to the UK, for example, you can go to the UK page and it'll tell you if there's anything that you need to know before you go, if there's any restrictions on entering the country for Americans, or if there's any restrictions on leaving the country for Americans. So, beyond the media and the headlines, that's really the best place that you're going to get the information for whether or not it's going to be okay for you to travel from.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I think it's really easy to get caught up with the media moments. Now, I do think that the media is doing a very important job right now in keeping us aware of what's going on, but really just looking at these sources who are our leaders and saying, what is a good idea to do and what is not, but also just being very responsible about yourself, how at risk that you are, and taking care of whether or not you are sick or really really don't want to be, which I think is pretty much everybody. That's going to cover everybody. This is definitely a delicate time for travel and a lot of other things, so just always keeping that in mind. I would love to see that solo female travel to is going to pick up again very very soon. I hope that this pandemic of the moment is not going to be a really long term issue for us, but we all need to be really super careful about it and pay attention to it. So, really good advice. But for the moment when this is all so much better, I want to get into these 7 tips that Jess has brought to the table today for a fabulous and safe trip abroad. Are you ready to get into it, Jess?
I am very ready.
Awesome. Okay, so look, your first tip here says familiarize yourself with your destination ahead of time. So, what are some tips around that? Like, where do you think that people should be focusing their attention as they're starting to dig into the place they want to go?
So I think using social media to just see what the place that you're going to is like is really, really helpful. We're so lucky that we can hop onto YouTube or onto Instagram and see, if we see someone's Instagram story that lives, for example, in London, and we can see what they've done that day. And just seeing people going about their lives and not having any problems and enjoying themselves is a huge weight off your shoulders, because usually when you're nervous about traveling somewhere, it's just because you're going somewhere that you're not familiar with. Fear comes from not knowing what's going to happen or what the outcome of something is. So if you can watch YouTube videos of your destination that you're going to, or follow people on Instagram that live there, whether it's friends or influencers, and just see what they're showing, then that helps. I think also Googling for help with things that you think you're going to be worried about when you get there. For example, a lot of people get nervous about taking public transportation from the airport to their hotel, which usually ends up being really easy for the most part. But because you're not familiar with the airport, you have just arrived maybe from a very long flight, you're not familiar with how the public transportation system works, you're going to get off the public transportation and then have to find your hotel. All of that feels really daunting. But a lot of times, if you just Google that, you can see either blog posts or videos of people who have actually just laid out exactly how you do something. So there's like photos, there's video footage showing you here's how you tap the card onto the card reader to get access to the underground system. And because you'll have seen somebody do it, it will feel way more familiar when you arrive, and you won't be like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. I've never seen any of this before. You'll already know, and you'll feel way more calm.
I love that, specifically because I'm also on a transit authority board here in Columbus. And I think that this topic in general just needs to be better educated across the board. But every place is going to be different. I'm sure that you could probably see something similar to this, maybe even on Jess's channel for London, just really trying to understand how it takes place in that particular area. But I think that's my favorite part of this tip is, okay, not only do I want to know where things are and what things are like and how to make things work, but I just want to make sure I know how to handle myself. So I think watching videos about, what expectations are of different places and how people can give you that advice. I remember literally one of the first things when I looked up how to go to London was I had heard you don't tip serving staff. And I just was like, wait, what? They don't take gratuity? That's considered rude. And it was just like really hard thing to kind of bite down on. But just looking into the resources that are available on social and on YouTube of like what is the right etiquette for that is so much better than going into a situation and being vulnerable when just because you didn't look it up.
Right, exactly. And I think, part of the fun of travel is not knowing everything, but for simple things like tipping or transportation, and especially when you're traveling on your own in a foreign country or even domestically, but just somewhere that you don't know, I think like simple things like that being able to see that ahead of time just to be able to free up your mind to be able to focus on the fun aspects of the trip, it's worth doing that extra research and looking all that up so you know what's going to happen.
Love that. Definitely follow those locals on your favorite social network. I think that's super helpful. And also, if it's Instagram, they're probably going to have some amazing posts, but make sure you watch the stories because that's where the magic is really happening. I like to see what the behind the scenes is going on. Okay, so your second tip is to book social accommodation. What does that mean?
Okay, so social accommodation is this blanket term that I have for places that you obviously stay overnight, but that have more of a social aspect to them. So, for example, I think we've probably all stayed at a hotel where there's like no lobby, there's no bar to sit at, there's nowhere to sit and relax with a coffee. And so, I mean, there's just no chance in a hotel like that of ever meeting any other travelers that you could potentially hook up with and go to dinner or do something with. So social accommodation, hostels, if you're in the hostel, if you're in the period of your life that you are happy to do hostels, which actually there are some really, really fancy hostels out there that have private rooms. So even if you usually go for hotels, you could go for a hostel and have the luxury of a private room, but then also have the social aspect where they always have a common room where people hang out. They often have a bar where you can have drinks or you can order food. And people who stay in hostels are so down to make friends and to find other people to do things with, because a lot of people who stay in hostels travel on their own or just with one other person. So everyone's like, a lot of them are backpacking, so they're just literally there to have fun and meet people. And so they're super open to making friends. And then if you can meet people and you can tag along with them if they're maybe going to go to dinner or like do a tour or something like that. And then you won't be on your own to experience the place you're in.
What do you think the biggest misconception is about this? Because I think I guess maybe my question is what is a hostel like? How is it really different? And why do you think maybe it's gotten a more I don't want to say bad rap, but like more misconceptions about it in comparison to staying at a traditional hotel, especially when it pertains to traveling alone?
Yeah. So hostels, they're different from hotels because they mostly will consist of rooms that have multiple bunk beds in them. So you actually book by the bed and not by the room. So let's say you're traveling solo. Instead of booking an entire hotel room, you might book one bed in like a 10-person room, which I think that's probably why it gets a bad rap. Also, the movie Hostel did not help.
Okay.
Yeah. And some hostels are pretty grimy and not great, but the hostel market, especially like let's say in Europe, has become, oh my God, like there's like the most luxurious hostels these days. And like I said, there are ones that also have private rooms. So you can book for a single room or a double room. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. But they're great, especially for people who are on a budget. If you just want to go traveling and you don't care about where you're staying and you're happy to like meet friends and things like that, just book one bed in a hostel. It'll cost you practically nothing. And you get to be in it amongst all the other travelers that are there.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, especially for those people who are just social butterflies and are not just traveling just for themselves, but to really get in touch with other people and get a little bit more cultured. Just don't take the word hostel to heart and look into it. I would imagine that the Airbnb movement is part of the reason why hostels have elevated maybe their actual accommodations too. So
yeah, I think so. And Airbnb has just gotten people a lot more used to booking into like an individual room in someone's house and just kind of like expanding their I don't know how to you know what I'm trying to say, but like instead of just going for the hotel and that's it, that's all we know, they'll try different things when it comes to booking accommodation, especially because it ends up being like a lot more cost effective, especially in big cities like London and Rome and places like that.
yeah, definitely the shared economy is contributing to the hostels doing very, very well. Love
Yeah.
that tip. Especially got to save some cash if you're going to do some country hopping, then do that. Okay, cool. Next tip is to get a local SIM card. What is what is the advantage to a SIM card for your phone versus changing up your plan, and why should we be thinking about that?
Sure. So some companies will give you good rates on using your own actual plan abroad, but also a lot of them don't, and they charge a ton of money. So a really cheap way to be able to still use your phone when you're traveling is instead to take your SIM card out of your phone and leave it in your hotel room and use a SIM card that is for the country that you're in. And then that your way you're only using your phone at local rates. So it's kind of like you're almost at home, but you're using it abroad. And you can just get pay as you go ones. So if you're going to be there for a week, you can get one for like 20 euros or 20 pounds, wherever you end up being, and just use it as you need. And I think having a local SIM is a really good idea because a lot of times if you're traveling on your own, you might just feel a bit disconnected from people at home. Or if you're getting nervous about maybe it's getting late and you're trying to get back to your hotel or your hostel, obviously you're going to feel a lot better if you can just pull out Google Maps or you can pull out WhatsApp and use your phone and be able to navigate yourself home or talk to somebody if you're feeling a bit lonely or anything. So considering it's not very expensive, then I would say getting a local SIM is a really good option for people traveling on their own.
Yeah, it's funny. You sometimes don't even realize that that's an option for you, especially if you haven't done a lot of traveling abroad. You may not have even seen a SIM card machine before. I remember even like taking my assistant, I think it was also my little brother, when you go to the major airports, the really big ones, like a JFK or a Heathrow, these machines are sort of there. And so you can start shopping for them. But before you get there, if you haven't figured out, are you going to go that route, or are you going to sign up for something with your international plan? Knowing that option is going to be there might be the more economical option. And a lot of us wouldn't even think about it if we didn't even know it exists. So that's a really good tip. This next one is great because I believe in being a little socialite when you travel if you are excited about meeting people. And so you talk about asking around if anyone has a friend in town. What does that look like, and how's the best way to approach that?
Yeah, I would recommend just posting on social media and just saying that you're going someplace. You don't even have to, sometimes you don't even have to say like, oh, does anyone know anyone in town? A lot of times people will just see that you're going someplace and they'll be like, oh, I have a friend in that city or this city. I can put you guys in touch and maybe you want to get a drink or something. But you can also ask. And a lot of times, especially if you're American and you're going abroad and your friend's friend is American, a lot of times they're like super keen to meet up with somebody who's a connection from the past that like knows a friend of a friend or something like that. Because if they haven't been home for a while, then it's just nice to kind of like bond over knowing a person from their past. Kind of, does that make sense? I feel like,
Absolutely.
yeah, when like I've been here for 7 years now, and every once in a while I have a friend who will say, oh, I have this friend's coming from LA. And so I thought maybe you guys can meet up for a drink. And I've had such nice conversations with them because we kind of talk about our mutual connection, and then we talk about home. And it's just kind of a nice little reminder. So people who live abroad are usually quite open to doing meetups like that. And then for you, it's great because first of all, you connect with somebody that you don't know necessarily, but you kind of will start to get to know. And it kind of just makes you feel like you know somebody in the city. And then you'll know if there's ever anything goes wrong, or if you just feel lonely or you need help with something, you have a connection there and they can help you or they can give you some recommendations.
Yeah, and this is just the best way to meet people is through someone else, and any rapport that they have being able to rub off onto you. It's just like you meet the most fascinating people. So I just love this tip. I think people forget it all the time. I try to be really good about, okay, I'm traveling to Vegas, I'm traveling to London, I'm traveling to wherever. I'm going to put it out into the world, or I'm at least going to send emails to the people that I know and say, hey, I'm visiting if you're around, or if you have any recommendations, or if you think I should meet anyone while I'm there, what can we do? Because any moment, especially if someone else is paying for my travel, which happens in work travel a lot, I like to leverage that and be able to connect with people that I wouldn't be able to make that same deeper connection with. So really, I really love that tip. I highly recommend that. Even for those introverts out there who are not sure, reconsider and do something low key and stay safe and meet people through friends, because that's really going to be a great sort of testimonial for who those people are. So moving on, love this one. And I think I have a bonus tip to go with this one, which is great. But number 5, practice doing things on your own. What do you mean by that?
So obviously, if you're going to travel on your own, which is great job in taking that step to go and do something, even though you can't get anybody else on board and you're not going to miss out on that opportunity. Obviously, if you're traveling alone, you will end up doing probably quite a few things on your own, which is totally fine. But if you have never done anything on your own, like having dinner or, I don't know, walking around someplace or visiting a museum, I would recommend practicing a bit before you go travel abroad, because you're already going to be in an unfamiliar situation. And then if you add on top of that, that you're also like doing something completely on your own and you've never actually done that before, and maybe it feels a little bit odd at first, that's just going to be maybe a little bit overwhelming. So while you're still at home, practice going to a restaurant and having dinner on your own, and go to a museum by yourself, and just get used to this nice sensation of, actually, I don't have to worry about anybody else when I'm walking around this museum, and I don't have to like make conversation. This is like an introvert's dream, isn't it? Like, I don't have to make conversation when I'm at dinner. I can just read my book, or I can sit at the bar and talk to the bartender or something like that. And the more that you do it, the more you'll feel like, oh, this is not a big deal. So when you do it, when you travel, it'll be totally fine.
I love this tip because I do think it's like Destiny's Child. We can throw around, how to be the independent woman and all of that, right? We get so excited about that. But the idea of being super independent doesn't always motivate us the same way we think of how to be alone. And I want everyone to remember that phrase, how to be alone, and go to YouTube immediately and type it in. And yes, I will also link to it in the show notes. One of my favorite videos of all time is 4.5 minutes of gold from this girl who made like one video. I don't think she ever did anything else, but this video is fantastic. It's literally called How to Be Alone. It has 8 million views on it. And it's just this beautiful, what feels like a diary entry of what it means to just learn how to be alone. I think it's really helpful for people in like a relationship sense. If you're single and trying to figure out how to not have a lackluster life scrolling your phone, but still be able to experience things. I get so motivated to just go do things by myself after I watch this video. So if you need some motivation behind that, and you're not 100% sure, like you got what it takes to be alone and do things alone, I highly recommend this video. So I just wanted to throw that bonus tip in there.
I've seen that pop up on my YouTube. I don't think I've ever actually watched it before, so I will definitely
because
make
it's
sure
so unassuming. It has like this just really, nice, pretty, like I guess pretty girl, whatever. She's just standing in the thumbnail. It's absolutely not going to pop out at you whatsoever, but the video is excellent. I mean, I just love it. So I recommend that. It's so funny. I can't believe I haven't recommended that yet, but I feel like that was the perfect time.
Oh, I do have one more tip for that as well.
Yeah.
I always get a lot of people asking me, am I going to get weird looks if I go and have dinner on my own, or if I go do things on my own? First of all, like for me, I mean, I'm talking about London. London has 9 million people in it. No one's going to notice you. And if they do, they will forget you as soon as you leave the building. So don't worry about that. But also, if you go to places that are smaller, if you go into a restaurant by yourself and you sit at the bar, or you, sit at a table even on your own, people are kind of curious, and they're probably going to be like, oh, hi, like, oh, is no one else joining you? Oh, what are you doing here? Especially if you're a foreigner and they're not used to foreigners. So don't look at it as a bad thing or as something that people are going to notice. And actually, it could be either no one really cares at all, or it might actually be a good conversation starter for you.
I'm so glad you said that. I feel like I have to remind this to people all the time. Yes, someone's going to see you, someone might pay attention to you, but like, It is not that deep, everyone. Everyone is so consumed with their own individual problems and the way they look and the way they seem that, yeah, it seems like, oh, if I go out on my own, if I go to the movies by myself, if I sit alone for dinner, if I'm just sitting alone in a park, like I'm just going to stand out like a sore thumb. For what reason? Why do you think people are so consumed looking for individuals who happen to be by themselves in a moment? I might be sort of just used to it at this point. So that's why I can stand on this little high horse of mine on this topic. But it just drives me crazy when everyone thinks they're being watched all the time because every one of us thinks we're being watched all the time. So meanwhile, we can't be distracted by other people who think that we're watching them.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, it's so much to think about, but also just let it go and go experience something. Don't let anyone hold you back.
Yeah.
Number 6, book lots of group activities. So how are we going to do this if we're alone? You know, where should we be looking for group activities? How do we know it's the right kind of people? What would you do in this case?
So I would just think about what kind of things that you would like to do. So for example, if you love food, then a cooking class would be great for you. If you love history, then look for a walking tour that goes around the historic parts of the city. But something about group activities, people who go on like group tours and book things like that they're just so friendly usually, especially Americans, so friendly and are so curious, like, where have you come from? How long are you here for? And it just becomes so easy to make friends with people who are also visiting the city. And even if you don't end up hanging out after the tour, if you've spent half a day with them, then you've not been on your own. You've been with a whole bunch of people doing something really interesting and learning or experiencing something cool.
I love this tip. We went on a honeymoon, my husband and I, which obviously I had someone to hang out with the whole time. So that's great. But we did one activity and it was like, we were in Aruba. We got on a school bus to get driven to this boat and we were out on this boat and there was food on the boat and there was like, you know, I guess like, what do you call it? Snorkeling. They had snuba, which by the way, I was horrible at. But anyway, they had all these things going on. It was hysterical. You get on this school bus and there's all these other couples who are probably also on their honeymoon at this resort. And it's only people from your own hotels. So it was really cool. They take you to this boat, you get there, you have a drink, you eat some food. Before you know it, you're all jumping into the water. You've had a little bit more to drink if you're one of those people that likes to have a little bit of alcohol. By the end of the trip, I'm not even kidding, it was like we were all best friends. And that same school bus that drove us back to the resort, it was like a bunch of banshees coming back from a field trip for kindergarten. And we were all friends the rest of the week that we were there. It was so much fun. And so even if you're not with somebody that makes you more comfortable in that moment, but you just go and do one of those experiences, the more you do in the experience, the more likely people are going to break down their walls and want to meet you. So
Yeah, and alcohol absolutely helps that. So
alcohol does help. If that's on the table for you, it does help a lot. Okay, so your final tip here is a good one, I think, especially the way we started this episode. Don't read the news too much or listen to naysayers. Where do you feel the balance is there?
So obviously, it's always good to be informed, but I think people can have this thing when they get a bit nervous about going somewhere where they do a bunch of research to see, like, they'll put into Google how safe is blah, blah, blah. And of course, when you type in something like that, all this information comes up of like the one time that, obviously this is bad, but like the one time that a tourist got attacked after leaving a bar, or the one time this thing happened, or the one time that thing happened. Whereas it never talks about the millions and millions of people that have gone through that city totally fine every single year. So, again, go back to the government website that tells you whether or not there's things you should be aware of when you go travel somewhere. That's always going to be your best bet. And keep an eye on the news if anything pops up. But again, the government website, they always update those as quickly as possible. But otherwise, remember that the majority of the world is pretty safe. And just as you would back at home or anywhere, you have to just be aware of your surroundings, make sure you're always putting yourself in safe situations. But for the most part, you're going to be completely fine. And there's not that much to worry about.
Yeah, I think just being self-aware when you are traveling is so much. If it's dark out or you're somewhere that you're really unfamiliar, which will be most of the time, you're not going to have your head down and your shoulders shrugged while you're scrolling your phone. Super not a good idea. Look like you know where you're going, stand up straight, watch out for who's around you, keep your backpack zipped up. Ideally, don't use a backpack if you want to be like, keep everything close to you. Like there's just some basic things. It was really amazing how much, I know this, I'm kind of calling people out, but when we went to Italy last summer, I almost got talked out of wearing my own wedding ring because people were like, oh, someone's going to steal it. If you go to Naples, that thing's as good as gone. And it was like, I feel like that's a little extreme. I could do that. I could leave it at home and I would know for sure. But I also have traveled many times and I know based on the fact that I pay attention to where I'm going, I'm not frivolous about things I'm carrying around or leaving things lay around or not paying attention to who's around me at all times. I think when you do those things and you take those necessary steps, not at a level of paranoia, but at a level of I am not vulnerable, so don't come for me. I think that that's really some of the best advice that I've gotten for travel.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point too, about what I call the quote unquote naysayers.
Mm-hmm.
When we had a few years ago, and I guess we had one a few months ago, a very small one. We did have a couple of almost back to back terrorist attacks, and at that point, I had a lot of people in my community saying that their family was telling them they shouldn't come, and people were saying it's not safe, and blah blah blah. And unfortunately, a lot of the times there are people who are saying that are really just not informed and haven't actually traveled abroad themselves. Whereas when these people asked me about the situation, unfortunately, those are such awful situations for certain people. But for the rest of the city, we have this thing that we say, like, when something like that happens, everybody checks, everyone, worries about people who are involved and hopes everyone's okay. Then we check Google Maps to see if our commute home has changed at all. And then we just go on living our lives. And really, we're not a city that like we're cowering over in fear for the next week. Actually, everything pretty much returns to normal. And but for people who have never been abroad, where it seems like such a scary thing, they're always the ones to be spreading this fear to everybody else when actually there's not that much to be worried about. And once you go, you'll see that for yourself.
Such good advice. Okay, so there's a lot here to think about. And I just want to quickly recap for everyone. When it comes to solo female travel or any traveler who is out and about abroad, here's how you can be fabulous and safe. Familiarize yourself with your destination ahead of time. Definitely follow locals and really try to get an idea of what it's like for them. Jess talked about booking social accommodation and getting a local SIM card. So make sure you're thinking about those things. Ask around if anyone has a friend in town. Get introduced to somebody right off the bat. Make it a little bit easier to maybe get shown around. Practice doing things on your own. Check out that video, How to Be Alone. It will inspire you. Book lots of group activities and don't listen to those naysayers. Jess, those were such great tips. I don't want to take up the rest of your time. I feel like there's so much here to download and I want people to learn more. Your channel on YouTube is a fantastic resource for people to check out, specifically an American perspective, living in London and all the cool things to do there. So where can everybody check that out and where can they stay tuned to you, the things you're working on, anything exciting that you want to share with everybody?
Sure. So you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/loveandlondon. And that's where you can find us on all the other social channels as well. That kind of covers it. And we have a website too, loveandlondon.com.
Definitely check that out. In a couple minutes, Jess, I'm going to challenge you to the secret show if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Awesome. You guys can find out more details about that in Shine Squad at patreon.com/AmyTV. But before we get to that, I need to ask you my final question. What does it mean to you to go after the life you want?
It means to me, basically freedom, the freedom to be able to make my own decisions for how my business is run and for how I work and where I work from and what hours I work, and the freedom to try new things or decide not to do something that I don't think that will work.
Thank you, Jess, for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, let's catch the deets from this conversation. First of all, plan smartly. Find out if the destinations you want to visit are supported by your own state department so that you have all the information you need to make a decision. There are resources you can go to that you can trust to tell you if where you're choosing to go is a good idea and how to think about it as you do. But the next deet, this is what you need to know. Do not listen to the people who don't travel, okay? You can't possibly know what the good advice is if you've never traveled before. Whatever they're watching on TV is not the whole story. So if you also want to be scared into staying home forever, then yeah, sure, go ask those people. But if you really want to know what it's like to travel at all to anywhere, much less alone, ask someone who actually knows and can also offer a similar perspective that you might be sitting in yourself. And finally, don't be afraid to make plans that involve meeting new people. Traveling alone is much more safe and fabulous when you meet amazing people, get a little bit more cultured, learn along the way. What was your favorite tip from this episode? I would love to hear from you. Head over to our Instagram account at Details Podcast and let me know in a comment. Hey, if you like getting advice straight to those earbuds, I'd love to share some simple steps for living your best life every day. That's my free audio training, The 7 Essential Details for Going After the Life You Want. To receive this audiogram, subscribe to the podcast and take a screenshot to show that you have subscribed. Email your screenshot to hello@detailspodcast.com with audiogram please in the subject line, and we will get that right over to you. You can also listen to Jess's secret podcast segment over in Shine Squad at patreon.com/AmyTV because like I said, I have a new podcast for everyone that's on detail therapy, that secret show, and we upload just about 5, maybe 10 if I'm getting a little lengthy, 5 to 10 minutes every weekday morning to start your day off right. So check that out in the squad. That's at patreon.com/AmyTV. That's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. Remember, subscribe for good vibes, kiss the ones you love, and go after the life you want. I'll see you back here on Tuesday. Cheers.